Well, I'm trying to continue where we left off just before June the 22nd. That was the election, because we're still living the election here. And I was following these two chaps, the election. And we were at the point, we had a very interesting discussion, the last one we did, about tactics. And David Warr was saying that he rejected the idea of knocking on doors. Now, Nick the Cornu was a great fan of knocking on doors. Now, lo and behold, as we all know, David Warr got elected, Nick didn't. Now,
I don't think it's because he knocked on doors, I can tell you.
No, well, that's what I want to know.
Sure.
Did you find the magic formula, how to get elected?
There is one, is there?
Well, I don't, you were talking...
I don't know. I mean, I think my take on it is, I would suggest that maybe I've been in the sort of, I don't say limelight, but in the sort of, forefront of events in writing articles, Chamber of Commerce president, all of those things. I think some of my success is presumably at brand awareness, the David Warr brand, as it were. After that, I felt very much that, I'm fortunate I run some coffee shops. So therefore, on a day-to-day basis, I'm seeing a lot of people with lots of different opinions and across a lot of different social spectrums. On top of that, I am walking up and down, because of the nature of the business I'm in, I'm walking into Waitrose car parks all the time. I am walking the length of King Street. And the number of people who stopped me over that time was quite significant and want your opinion and your views. So I think it's just all a combination of things. I wouldn't say that I've actually done a piece recently said I feel knocking on doors a little intrusive. I'm not sure that people are overly comfortable with the door knocking, and what you get. I certainly, from what I saw, got a lot less positive reaction on the doorstep than I ever got, dare I say it, in a conversation in a Waitrose car park.
Well, the trouble is there is all this wonderful Wizzo technology which seduces people.
Yep.
That you don't have to go out there and do hard work. You can sit in your armchair and recruit people to vote for you, but it doesn't
that's not right at all. I mean, and I
work.
think you have to still be in people's vision and be real to people. And I said, I think my fortune is that I'm involved in coffee shops, which is the phenomena of the current times. It's something. It's the new pub. It's the new social hub, as it were. So by being the sheer fact that I'm involved in that on a day-to-day basis, I think assists made the opportunity for me much stronger. So I feel like I'm taking over here.
I wanted you. I mean, you're the new boy, and lo and behold, your first attempt, you get elected. Now, Nick's tried; he's got elected once, but using the traditional method of knocking on doors.
Well, it's not about knocking on doors. For the left, which I am, it's to address the social groups who don't vote, and to try and win over sections of the working class. That's the 60% who do not vote. We know amongst that, those who do, the 1,700 who do, it's the same sort of people who vote island-wide. They're the wealthy, on the whole. Sociology of St Helier is slightly different. But the great problem is voter abstention. It's the fact the working class doesn't vote. So it's very difficult for the left to address it. I can say, well, reforms on the left. Well, okay, yes. But I think the main issue here was the success for party. Reform and for Better Way as well. It's about organisation and money and candidates.
Yeah, but the parties, as we all know, the declared party, only one was successful. And they've been doing the practice for quite a few years now. They've been running into it. And they did extraordinarily well to get the number of seats they did. A socialist type of policy in an island which, as we all know, is a very conservative island.
But they got elected because of the crisis, because sections of the lower middle class and working class are being affected by those issues of prices, of unaffordable rents, housing. It's pressing in on them. They wanted the solution, and the solution was to vote for reform. Or to vote for David.
I don't see it. I don't see people who've got a decent amount of money but voting for reform. I can't see that.
No, they didn't.
No, but I can see it. People who are bubbling, they're coming out, they're going to be pensioned and all that sort of class of person who've they've had good jobs, and they're beginning to fret a bit about their retirement. You know, all that sort of class of person down, if you go down, and working class people, but they don't vote. I don't think, I mean, all I can say is David walked in as a businessman, and he approached it as a businessman. And what he was doing, he was recruiting on a business basis. And there's so many customers out there who are going to buy your product, and he knows that. That's how he makes his living. And it's you're trying to convert people from what they are or do or think to think your way and vote for that.
What we're asking people to do on the left is to vote in their class interests.
Yeah, but they don't know that, do they?
That is the problem for the left, and that is how they have to engage. And the issue in Jersey, I mean, I was amazed. I was just reading about Guernsey in the early 20th century. Turnouts, 6%. 6%
Really?
in Guernsey.
Wow.
I was just bowled over. Yet, they actually had women deputies in the 1930s.
Right.
I mean, Guernsey's a faraway place for which we know nothing. And I was a bit shocked to discover that. But
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think reform, if you look at the approach reform took, they tactically, it was genius, I have to say. You know, this idea of putting groups of people together and saying, vote for the team, you know, and I think tactically,
Party, isn't it?
well, that's the party, yeah. But the point was that none of the other parties managed to achieve that kind of
They
mentality.
tried.
They tried, but they failed. And interestingly enough, you know, Russell and Judy and Scott from the last election, they tried to get people to vote as a block, you know, for their three, and they were successful 4 years ago.
Slate,
you know,
I think they call themselves.
yeah. So 4 years on, they were unsuccessful. But I think
did they lose because they were perceived as the
incumbent.
They were incumbents. They should have had an advantage.
Yeah.
Were they because it was they were the alliance party or alliance-led government? They were ex-ministers in that, and there was. I don't know, it's very strange for incumbents to lose their seats so
This
easily.
change thing, which is everywhere around the world anyway, but you started in this square with Time for Change.
Yes.
Now that word's been buzzing
Reform.
around. Right? It's been buzzing around. Now that's in people's heads.
Yeah.
They want change.
Yeah.
They haven't analysed what exactly it is they want, but they want something different. Now I stood once as a candidate, somebody different, and a lot of good that did me.
Yes, yeah.
You know, I've got my own problems. But the idea that people want change is fairly universal amongst all classes. People who wouldn't vote for reform are saying, yes, we need change. People who are in the business world are saying that. And there are problems which have to be addressed. But in a party sense, I don't know. I don't know how they can be addressed. I mean, reform will go on grabbing seats around the town area. But I don't think in 1,000 years, if the countryside stays as it is, they'll ever get seats in the countryside. They just won't do it because there's some sort of. It's rather like when you go into this, you get sprayed with something. It's the same.
It's the way that the society is divided geographically. You've got a geographical expression of a social divide. Out in the country parishes, that is the wealthy. That's those old farmhouses are now inhabited not by farmers but by bankers, by trust administrators and advocates and so on. That's the difference.
That is true, but they go into his coffee shop. They don't say, I'm not coming into your coffee shop.
Yes, yeah, I know. I mean, what I would just say, I mean, what I found so interesting, I mean, this point about change, and I think one of the issues which strikes me is how define it. You know, this is something I've been working a lot on over the last couple of weeks, is definitions. You know, definitions around homelessness, definitions around affordability. What do we mean by affordable housing? Where do you pitch that at, you know? So there's lots of, you know, big words used out there, but then when you start to try and drill down into them and say, what does that mean exactly, or how do you define that? It's very difficult to define. I think the biggest thing for me is delivery, and I think this is why, you know, from a business point of view, in business, if you don't deliver the product, the service, or whatever, you are out of business. It's a very, very simple equation. And I think that's maybe why some people look to me to put me in place, thinking that I can assist with delivery. But I know the new government, and this is something we've talked about a huge amount, is if we don't deliver, and we just procrastinate for another 4 years in the way the previous governments have carried on, we will be kicked out as sure as eggs are eggs, you know. So I think the focus very much now is on delivery, but it's the right type of delivery, you know.
This is the first time I've actually seen it mouthed, we want change, and change actually happened. It wasn't necessarily very coordinated, apart from your group, your non-party party.
Yes.
They had an idea, but where that's going to go, I can't imagine.
Let's see.
And because it is so diverse, and well, you know.
But I think what's interesting now is because we have a diverse. What I'm really pleasantly surprised by is the depth of. It's difficult to quantify this intelligence, bright thoughtfulness, which I see around the table now. So I'm really encouraged by that. Because we're not in a party, there's none of this sense of, oh, I've got to align with. Okay, fine, you're council ministers, you need to have a view which goes out into the public domain. But around the table, I think there's a huge amount of respect for each individual, their expertise in their particular area, in their field, and what they can bring to the table. And I think that's what emboldens me, certainly, and makes me feel confident that things will change.
Can you separate one department from another? You see, if you talk about housing,
yep.
You say, well, what's that got to do with education?
Yep.
But then you suddenly find that there is a relationship,
Absolutely.
you see?
Oh, housing is at the fulcrum point
That's
of
right.
everything. There's no doubt about that at all. Whether it be education, where you say affordable housing, I mean, how much people have to spend in their pocket, you know, got money in their pocket to spend in the economy. I mean, it really is. When you just look around at the interlinkages, finding spaces for housing, finding appropriate housing, finding enough, you know, what I call communities, trying to think about in terms of communities. How do you link up the different communities? There's so much to think about in that area.
Where would you have gone, Nick, if you were in David's position? You got yourself elected.
Yep.
Yes.
And the lady came along to you and said, "What job do you want?" What would you have said? "I want to be minister for." What would you say? Where's your burning?
Not housing, but probably.
Why not housing? Why not housing, Nick? Do you feel it's a poison chalice?
I think it is the
or
poison
is it,
chalice.
Or what do you?
It's
what's
the most
your,
difficult because I think to get to grips with it needs different types of policies, and the ones that the left suggests are the ones that's going back to pre-Thatcherism. It's giving security of tenure to tenants.
Yep.
Rent
I get that.
controls.
I get that.
That's one way of managing, and the social housing in the old style of council housing for lifelong living and security, and that gave people a social base, but it's been completely destroyed by the Thatcherite project, and it's a mess, and we can see that throughout Britain, and it's here in Jersey as well.
So you're not coming up with a solution then?
No. Well, that would have been, that is the solution which is suggested by the left. Of course.
Right, okay. It's a solution, yeah.
But I don't think the right can adopt it. They won't, because it means challenging certain privileged sections.
Because this is where reform really broke new ground, because the traditional socialists are usually a party of opposition. Traditionally, that's the way, because they don't get elected to be government. So they form themselves into that mentality of being opposed to. It's not necessarily they want to live that life, but they just are thrown in that situation. But for reform to come out with a whole manifesto to address all the perceived problems as a manifesto, that's what we're going to do. And as he said, housing, your brief, is going to be their first thing. It's going to be the Monday morning they go in, the first stage session. That's going to be on the table. What's going to happen to that, I don't know now in this current scenario. But they did try that. But if you're the establishment, and then the people district was it, you don't have to do that, do you? You just have to say, well, we're elected, we're going to carry on.
I disagree. I think I wish it were that simple. You know, we're going to carry on. You can't carry on as it has gone on before. You know, we've seen and Nick is right here, we've seen the commodification of housing. You know, instead of it being a house being a home, it's become another investment tool, another method of investment. And I think we have to get to grips with that and recognise that there is a place, always a place for these opportunities. But the first and ultimate focus has to be on a home for people. You know, that's our first focus. After that, if you want to go and speculate on housing and all the rest of it, I think the government has to give you there have got to be some consequences in such a restricted market of that. You know, some way in which we can mitigate some of that speculative investment. And as I've dug down, and obviously I've banged on about data, and it really has been a challenge to find data. There is lots of data out there, but it's all disparate. You know, it's in little places here to try and build that picture. And I think that's been the massive challenge for me so far. I'm slowly forming my ideas, and I will certainly over the next 4 weeks we will have ideas on it. But it's very much a blended solution. It's not about, oh, let's carry on with the free market and all the rest of it, and let's, you know, abandon social. It's not at all. It has to be a mixture, but we have to somehow constrain this madness which has been going on for the last couple of years.
I cannot say what the coincidental link is, but it is obviously not coincidence that the Isle of Man, Guernsey and Jersey have all got housing problems. And they're very similar housing problems.
I think London has a housing problem.
And I was going to say that. Other places, it's not a tax haven specific problem.
No, I agree.
But the three tax havens, which are very wealthy places in a small area, finite, they've got sea around them, so it's fair to say that's Jersey, that's Guernsey. Unlike London, which spreads out so you can live in a cheap part and an expensive part. But these little islands have got the benefit of being islands, but they've all got that problem, and they've got immense wealth. So it makes me think, well, can anybody, I don't want to dampen your spirit, can anybody address this problem? Because it means so many things within that society's makeup have got to be addressed and changed.
Sure.
This is the word that has to apply to it all, isn't it?
I agree, and that's why we will never please everybody. You'll make one policy, one group of people, which, oh, hey, that's a nice idea, and then you'll make another, but then the other side go, you can't do that. Say tomorrow David Warr said, right, we're going to halve the price of housing, okay? On one hand, there'll be a whole bunch of people going, that's fantastic, good on you, David. And then the other hand, they'll be crying their eyes out because they'd be going, oh my God, I'm now in negative equity, I can't afford the repayments, etc., etc., etc. So you have this dichotomy within the marketplace. So the question is where is that middle line? Is there a middle line which you can tread, which accommodates both sides? In business sense, we call it satisficing. In other words, it's not totally the answer, but it's as good an answer as you can achieve. Well, given
the man with the bowler hat who felt like Icarus, he got too near the sun, and he was ignominiously defeated, and that must have hurt him very much. But he did say one thing, which is an eternal problem. If you want to reduce the price of housing, then what about the people who've already bought into the market? And most of the market are overpriced and have paid too much. If you look at things on a true value basis. So most people will finish up with a negative equity.
If there's
and they don't want
might be coming.
They don't want, people for some reason don't want to be lumbered with 200,000 of debt which they can't do anything about. So he hit the nail on the head with that. I thought, yes, but he had no solution for it. All he could do was keep prices high to maintain that, non-affordable housing. But somehow or other, you volunteered for this ridiculous job.
This ridiculous job, thank you. Can I change something a little bit? Because Nick has said he wouldn't do housing. What was Nick going to do instead?
Thank you very much.
I'll lead him into that one. Before I give you all my solutions.
I think Home Affairs, actually, to look at immigration issues and rights. Hopefully actually try and get hold and control over the Crown officers, because they are a major group who have no control, and I think that needs to be achieved.
We have no control over
the judiciary is not overseen here at all.
That's right.
It's
suspect. It is, and historically, as I've read the Privy Council records going back for years, hundreds of years, they are a thorn in the side of development or progress. They are talk about being conservative, they are the ultra-conservative. But they always come over as being nice guys.
I'm sure they are.
I don't know who the PR firm that works for them is.
No idea.
Well, they control the state.
But can I ask you then, in terms of immigration, so where do you sit then? Is your thoughts around immigration that we've got too many people on the island and we should be looking to restrict
that's
that?
Interesting.
Or how do you feel? What do you feel about that?
Close the gates, close the doors.
Pull up the drawbridge. What's your thoughts?
Now, ideologically, because there's a sudden realisation, even by business, we haven't got enough people. Where are we going to get them from? And these are the contradictions of the system, and it's so manifest and apparent. And I'm just sort of sitting there laughing, going, "Well, I kind of told you so." And what are the solutions? I don't know. It's Brexit. These are the failures.
Yeah.
I'd still like to do the job, and but with a view to making it a lot more democratic, and also having a go at the getting control over the Crown Office. The judiciary is, if that's where the remit would be with the Home Affairs Minister, but I think it could do.
Of course, as you know, you're touching on something which has the crown in front of it. So anything you do, it has that label on it. I'm
Very
afraid.
careful. Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
It's part of the
Not my
system.
field of expertise in any way, shape, or form. So I won't even.
And nobody can
comment on
touch it because it's a different
No
league.
one dares to even challenge or question
Exactly,
it. But it's about
exactly.
state power and authority.
And the general public don't think about it. They don't even know what the bailiff does. Never mind what about, whether he should.
I know
be.
what the bailiff does. He allows me to take my jacket off in
Oh, right.
when we have a vote
I
on it in
thought
the
that
summer.
was brilliant. And the first thing was the discomfort of the members.
Yeah.
But I would say the way the police deal with, because you're a Romanian, we're going to arrest you. The way we deal with you, the expectations, and what we think about you, there are assumptions. It's racist. It's clearly racist.
Yeah.
But if you're a nice Victoria College boy, you get treated very differently.
Well,
that is state
even
power.
Scottish cricket now is absolutely full of racism, so we're told. It's institutional racism. Scottish, I didn't even know they had cricket in Scotland.
I kind of, the racism thing, it's frustrating. I mean, I don't know, maybe at the level you're talking about, but in our area of work, obviously, we rely on an immigrant workforce. I mean, what you would define as an immigrant workforce. And race, I feel Jersey is extraordinary in that respect, in how we embrace all the different cultures that we deal with. I mean, we've got Bulgarians, we've got Romanians, we've got Polish, we've got Latvians, all working cheek by jowl, Portuguese, Jersey, all working cheek by jowl and all getting on with each other. And this racism thing, I'm not quite sure where we're at with it all, because I think the realization is we need an immigrant workforce, because otherwise coffee shops don't stay open. Health services, we can't have health service provision. The bus services just had to reduce the numbers of bus travel that it can do because it hasn't got sufficient people. I mean, we are in just this crazy situation. Yet, when you look at the demographics in Jersey, the demographics are this baby boomer generation who are all getting older and older, who are suddenly going to be this massive weight on the economy. And what are we going to do?
But that scenario is
that?
not too difficult to grasp, is it?
The scenario, it seems to be by a lot of people.
Well,
because we're not dealing with it at the moment.
That's right. And the people that Nick says, well, they don't vote. Well, of course they don't vote, but surely they can see that big problem arising, can't they? It's been there, obviously, to anybody for long enough.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's the problem with it is it's such a long-term problem that a lot of people go, oh, well, it's not my 4-year tenure that's the problem. It'll be the next 4 years, so I don't need to worry about it this time around. And one of the warnings, red flags I've thrown up is we've got to start thinking about how we're going to look after, what are the communities going to look like? What is I don't think everybody wants to live in a retirement home. I think what people want to do is be engaged in communities, whether it be with youngsters, older folk and all the rest of it. And I think we've yet to come to terms with any of this yet. I mean, it is quite staggering, because I'm the generation of baby boomers, and where will I be in 20 years time? Who's going to be looking after me and making sure I behave myself or whatever. But I want to be engaged in the community. I don't want to be farmed out and staring out into space. Okay, maybe my mental capacity will have deteriorated so much that that's maybe all I'll be able to do. But I'd like to think that if you're more engaged, we'll have a healthier economy and a healthier individuals as well.
it's one of those things that we don't consider because it's too frightening.
Yeah.
And obviously our mortality is not something we
want to discuss too much.
We try not to consider it.
Yeah.
And these problems are like that because unfortunately for you, there is no simple solution.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether there's even a complicated solution. But there certainly isn't a solution if you discriminate against people in the way that they are discriminated against in Jersey.
Yeah.
That is heading for more problems. Allied, not necessarily the same problems, but more problems.
It's a bit of ironic, isn't it? You know, Jersey's built on immigration, isn't
Absolutely.
it? You know, but just because they don't all have, come with an English accent or from the British Isles, it's almost like, oh, well, there's something different about that. It's not at all. It's the same, same mix of people. But where is it headed? I mean, the first thing we need to get our heads around is this housing issue, because if we don't bring the cost of housing down, we won't even encourage an immigrant workforce into this island. Because why should you come into this island, be housed in inadequate housing because you're unqualified? The vast majority of inappropriate housing is in our with our immigrants who are in this 0 to 5 year category. That's not right. That's not healthy. That's certainly not healthy for the long-term good of our economy. And we need to really seriously address these things.
We're not full of an island of people of low intelligence.
No, not at all.
Those facts are perfectly clear, and people have been making decisions on the basis of knowing those facts. So these are knowing decisions that have been arrived at.
But as Nick has said, we flipped this around, haven't we? The population thing was, at one stage it was close the doors, pull up the drawbridges and all the rest of it. And now suddenly everybody's going, well, actually, we might have to lower the drawbridges to get people in. And track, and that's a completely, get your head around that, spin your head around that. Because, like you say, I think the problem is we see this very much in town in St Helier, the economic hub of this island. Whereas maybe if you're out in St Mary or St John or Trinity or whatever, you don't see, your focus, the sharpness of the importance of that isn't there. And I think this is where we have this almost like a two islands within one island.
I wonder why somebody's following me around with their hooter, if they want to sound the hooter. Why would they want to do that?
I don't know.
If you hadn't got housing, you have got housing,
Yes,
where else would you have gone?
Well, I mean, lots of people would have said economic development in that kind of area. I mean, but I've always said I actually was interested in the overall infrastructure piece, which is a huge piece. But it's too much for me. I mean, I'm trying very hard to stay in touch with my business as well as, and I think it's really important that I do stay in touch on that side because it gives me a reality check. One of the points I say is when you walk through those hallowed doors, as it were, you've got to remember you're just a representative of the public out here. You don't suddenly become some three-headed monster who operates in a chamber. And I think it's really important that we keep
I am
a hold
trying
of
to raise a discussion on that very issue. Who do you represent? Because it's even less clear now than it was before the reforms. Because is a deputy for a parish or for people in general, or and it's the same. The constables, are they?
And it gets more complicated when you become a minister because you're suddenly looking at island-wide issues. I'm getting queries from people in St Helier South and asking about very valid points and stuff like. In fact, tonight I'm going to be at the waterfront chairing a waterfront association meeting, trying to do that. Thank God there's the Ave Départ group as well, so we can get involved in there as well. But they are quite big forums. There's not much ability to talk one-to-one with people. Certainly in the position that I find myself in. But it's quite interesting, even today, how many people are still willing to, you're still in your coffee shop, how many people are willing to chat to you and say, I've got this. And they do come up with great ideas. And I think one of the things I've learned is the best ideas are going to come out from everybody around us, and us informing us in terms of policy making.
Of course, the guy like you who gets elected or tries to get elected has their own set of ideas, their own ideas.
Yes, yeah.
And when they meet with Tom and so on, and they've got the general public, and they disagree and they want their ideas. I always think about the guy years ago when they were talking about Fort Regent, they wanted years and years ago. And he had this bee in his bonnet about Real tennis.
Okay.
And every time there was a meeting about Fort Regent, he'd come up with, I wanted a real tennis court, which they used to play in Elizabethan times.
Oh, right.
And it was, people get a bee in their bonnet.
Yes, yeah.
Somehow or other, you as the representative of whoever you are, the representative, has got to accommodate these people.
Yeah.
And of course they can't be accommodated, that's the fact of the matter.
Sadly, that is the case. And obviously there are going to be mad ideas out there and there are going to be really great ideas. And some of the stuff is disseminating those ideas and how do they work together. But I think you get a sense of the zeitgeist, as I call it, of when you talk to enough people in a broad enough way. But it's, as I said, my take on it all is the more I have post-it notes. I'm a big post-it note fan. So every time I have a comment made to me and somebody says something, I write a little note down. I have this Warr on housing wall in Broad Street. Thank you. And I love it because I think it really gives lots of ideas out there. You may not use any of them. You may only use a handful of them. It doesn't matter particularly. But I think it's really good that there are all these ideas out there because in the end, hopefully, it will come up with the best solution, as I said, this satisficing solution rather than the perfect solution.
And are you on board with the 100 days idea?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think we all are.
Do you think we'll be able to continue with these discussions because you're speaking to us openly and freely?
Yes, yeah.
Eventually, the kind of the civil servants will be saying to you, "Keep your mouth shut."
Well, somebody at your inductions, that's what I want to know.
Yes, yeah.
At your induction,
Sure.
who said you shouldn't speak to social media?
Nobody has.
Well, that
Nobody
was
has.
reported.
Well, was it? Oh, no, not at all. I mean, I am conscious that the states of Jersey have, or the government of Jersey, however you want to phrase that, have a comms department who are probably right now very nervous about seeing me sat here. But the reality is we as this Better Way 2022 group got elected by being quite human and open and being discussive. And I think it's important that we maintain that. And we always kind of look at each other and remind each other of that fact. It's important that we stay, real to people. And as far as I'm
those
concerned,
few meetings I attended,
Yeah.
which your group organised,
Yeah.
were brilliant.
Yeah.
But they were only a dozen or 2 dozen people attending.
I know.
So they were just skimming. They weren't even touching the surface.
I know. And hopefully we will reignite some of those in September time, October. Right now it's extraordinarily difficult because there's so much policy making going on and so much work being put into this 100 days. But for sure there's a real intent to reignite those events and have more listening events and be more accessible as a government. I think it's absolutely important. You just don't become remote. But as you say, the comms department are all about wanting their nervousness, and I get their nervousness of a united front of this is the states of Jersey. But I think the comms department is more relevant maybe to external issues. In other words, people looking into Jersey and how we present ourselves, as opposed to when we're having discussions internally. And I think that's probably where we need to find a balance.
Our reputation.
It becomes a bigger thing, a much bigger thing.
I must say, I find it a little bit perverse, really, and bear in mind the sort of businesses which do operate here.
Yeah.
It goes into action every time there's a scandal.
There is. That's right.
Well, this is. I mean, and I take the point. I mean, it's a challenge, but there is a massive industry on this island who need, to get the information out, and there are obviously lots of media external to this island who have an agenda, who want to portray the island in a different way. I mean, thankfully, we've got programs just recently, Country File on BBC, showing the beauty of this island and what's actually going on.
It was on 1 o'clock this morning, but it wasn't the same program. I don't know what it was.
There were two brought here, but I feel like at least we're getting some of the word that Jersey isn't just this hidden away finance centre which nobody ought to, in some hidden dark corner. We actually have something to offer the world, and I believe we have. And I think this new government, 50-50 men, women, that kind of thing, I think we're leading the way a bit in all of this. And I think people should, hopefully some people outside this island will start to sit up and take notice.
So what do the socialists say about that, Nicola? Is there a programme there which you could go along with?
Well, I'm very interested to see what it can achieve, and there's an expectation, I think, in the public that something's got to happen, something's got to change. It's got to be concrete. Whether it can be delivered is another matter, because I think some of that expectation is a bit naive. But we shall see. I mean, I think things will change. They've got to. Someone's got to start addressing.
We went along to the launch of the United Progress and what they call themselves, the Balash Project.
Yeah.
The joint, and there was only 15 people from the public turned up, which amazed me. I thought they'd have a full 15 people or so. And there was a guy who was very vociferous in the back row of the left. I don't know who he was. Never met him, And ourselves, we had our little chip in, and we challenged them. I challenged them on one thing for what they were saying, the programs, equality, decent, fair deal. I say, well, it's socialism. You're talking about socialism. And I don't think they'd considered it in that way. And I saw that discussion was being had, one of the Guardian or the Independent were having that discussion about the UK, about people want to reform things. And you inevitably look at socialism. Yeah. Well, you say socialism, it is instant death, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
It's election, that's it, finished. But they're thinking it.
Yes.
They're looking for fairness.
Yes, yeah.
And the solutions are to be found in socialism. And they were a bit you know, they didn't quite know what to say at that meeting about that.
It's trying to sort of label things, isn't it?
It's absolutely.
Yeah, but fairness is at the fundamental heart of all of this. You know,
Exactly.
how do you know? It's not us and them. I keep saying we're all in this together, and I know a lot of people disagree with that, but I do believe that. I think we are, and I think as long as we keep recognising that, then hopefully we will come up with solutions. I agree with Nick. There's a degree of naivety to it all, and I do sense that a bit, you know, because I see the old hard-bitten politicians there who've been there and got the scars and the whatever, you know, done that. And you know, for me, it's kind of I don't have those scars yet. But I hope that because of that freshness that we're bringing, we don't, you know, it's like a child almost. It's like not knowing where the boundary is, and you know, and always having to experiment with where the boundary lies.
We admire your idealism and enthusiasm, and you're that's good. I mean, take it to the system, see if it can. But probably some of those old diehards who are sort of going, you'll never succeed. The pessimists.
Well, that's you know,
They're part of the problem.
if you're in business, you have to be an optimist. I can tell you, that's the thing. You know, otherwise you don't invest in anything, because the reason you invest is because you're optimistic that you're going to make a return on your investment. And I think that's my take on it. And now, this is me invested in politics, invested in the island. So that's why my attitude is one of positivity rather than that skepticism that can drag you down.
Shall we stop? Shall we stop? Shall we talk all day?
I think we're done. Have I got to my
Thank
half?
you, David, for your openness.
Yeah.
Because there is a divide. It's not just left and right. There's this division which is also libertarian, authoritarian, and I think we're on the libertarian side of things.
Yeah. No. Good. I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for speaking to us.
No worries at all. I shall go back to my